So good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to be with you all this morning. I am Joni Robbins, and I am the Purchasing Director at NCDOT, North Carolina Department of Transportation. And so we're going to walk through the purchasing training course this morning. There are sections, different sections in the presentation in which you have an opportunity to ask questions. Carla is excellent with keeping a watch in the chat, and she will let me know what questions you have, and she will also open up an opportunity for you to just ask the question verbally. So we'll get started. Um, so a little bit about NCDOT. We are obviously the agency that handles the highways and byways across the state of North Carolina. Our mission is that we connect people, products, and places safely and efficiently, while we are also being accountable, customer focused, environmental sensitive, and our goal is to enhance the economy and the vitality of North Carolina. And what you see there are the different divisions and business units within NCDOT. We have the division of highways, we have aviation, we have, most people know about this one, DMV, and we have rail, we have ferry, we have the ports of North Carolina, we have the Turnpike Authority, we have the Global Trans Park, and we also have our integrated integrated mobility unit as well. And so we are going to be talking about the rules for state procurement. We're going to talk about registering with the state, the EVP system. We're going to talk about purchasing, seeking competition, solicitation methods, evaluations. How do we and the award? How do we do that? How do we evaluate submissions? We're going to talk about the award process as well as how we monitor contracts. We are also going to cover what's the difference between rules and laws pertaining to purchasing for the state. We're going to talk about what's considered a good and what's considered service. We are going to, I'm going to let you know when you see the word delegation, what does that mean? And what about policy? And we are going to have a discussion around the different types of contracts. So we have the purchasing hierarchy. I just kind of wanted to share with you for the state, how are purchasing rules put in place and what are they, what is giving them their authority. So first of all, we have our general statutes, which is laws, right, that are enacted by our legislation, by those officials that we elect to sit in charge of how we want to conduct things in North Carolina. And then from there, we have what we call the administrative code, which are rules that kind of tells us how we are supposed to put the laws into effect. What does that look like? And then we have the purchasing manual, and we have an overarching manual that is maintained by both, for non-IT is the Division of Purchasing Contracts, and for IT, it is the statewide IT procurement office manages that. And then from those two overarching procurement manuals, each individual agency will have their own manual, which cannot um, uh, disagree with the procurement manual from PNC and the statewide IT procurement office. And so as you get down to the agency purchasing manual, that's where you're going to have mostly procedures in terms of how, what steps are the folks in those agency procurement offices, what are they going to take and how are they going to complete those tasks. And also listed the OSBM budget manual there, because that's also part of the procurement process, in the sense that it offers guidance to all state agencies, really, and universities regarding, what's allowed in terms of expenses and reimbursements. We also have the governing authority for, I mentioned the Department of Administration's Division of Purchase and Contracts for non-IT purchases. And those goods and services are governed by the general statutes of the laws that are found in Chapter 143, Article 3, and then the administrative code, the rules on how we are going to do purchasing, those are found in Title 1 in Chapter 5. And for the IT purchases for goods and services, those general statutes or those laws that governs that are found in Chapter 147. Their administrative code for IT is in Title 9, Chapter 6. We also see here the State Construction Office, which obviously is in charge of the construction, renovation, or alteration of physical properties for the state of North Carolina. And those rules that govern state construction can be found in our general statutes in those chapters that you see listed there, 116, 143, and 153. And there's also a state construction manual as well. So who are your potential customers with regard to the state, and what opportunities are there for you to work within the states? And so we have listed here that we have 28 executive state agencies. We have 58 community colleges, 16 public universities, over 2,500 public and charter schools. There's 100 counties in North Carolina, and we have over 500 municipalities, local governments, in which you can do business with. This is a listing of the different departments and boards that's within and the supporting organizations that's within the state. And I like to just kind of point out in that right column where it says type of agency, when it says cabinet there, that is those agencies' head or their secretary. Those are appointments. So they are appointed by the governor. And if it says council, then those secretaries or the head of those departments are elected officials. So, and then I also listed there the supporting agencies as well, groups as well. So let's talk about what is need and how is that identified. The agency, the questions that have to be answered are, what are we buying and how much does it cost? Do we have funding in place to support that? And how do I buy it? What process am I going to use? And what is the documentation that's needed for that process? Then purchasing, my group, right? One of the things that we are, the questions that we are asking are very similar to what the end user is going to ask, right? What are you trying to buy and how much does it cost? Is it a good? Is it a service? Is there a delegation? What's the amount you're spending? And so what does that mean for us in terms of delegation, and which determines what process we have to use? We'll talk a little bit more around delegation. And is it a mandated resource, or are we going to get this on the open market? We'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically a mandated resource is something like state-term contracts. I'm sure you've heard of those. And the open market is, in a large sense, a competitive process, but there are circumstances in which it would not be competitive, and we'll talk about that. And what about special circumstances? What process are going to use? Is this a pressing need? Is it an emergency? Is there a waiver needed for this purchase? So those are the kinds of questions that the agencies, the state side, that we're looking at when we're trying to identify the need. And so goods and services. So for goods, those are commodities, supplies and materials that are tangible. And for goods, there is a 1.75% charge to our vendors for those. And some, just something tangible. You can actually see it, touch it. Those are some examples of those goods that we're talking about. If we're talking about a service, that's something that's intangible. It's a work or task that's performed by an individual. that really requires specialized knowledge, some type of expertise, or similar capabilities, for that. And as you see here, this guy, it looks like this is a plumber, so he's providing a service, and this is our, the washer here, is also providing a service, a expertise, around what they're doing. And it's not something you can actually touch. And so mandated resources that we talked about, before the agency can purchase anything, they first got to consider, what it is that you are trying to buy. Is that good and or service provided by a mandatory state term contracts, right? Is it on a state term contract? Is it available through correction enterprises? Is it something that surplus property can manage? All those things that are listed there. Those are our first consideration, because by law and by mandate, we are required to look at these resources first in terms of being able to procure a good or service. So state term contracts are just pretty much what that is, what those are. They're statewide contracts that are put in place for non-IT goods and services. They are put in place by the Division of Purchase and Contracts. If it's an IT good or service, it is put in place by the statewide DIT procurement office. And these are used by all agencies unless there's an exemption that's in place or special terms and conditions that specify otherwise. These state term contracts can be either mandatory, or convenience. If it's mandatory, it means that the agencies have no choice. They must use, if that good or service that they're trying to procure is available through one of the state term contracts, they are required to purchase it through that contract. There are some exceptions. For instance, if the vendor cannot provide you the good or service that you need in the time frame that you need it, then there are some options there. But otherwise, if they can provide it what you need in the time frame that you need it, then you are required to purchase through that mandatory state term contract. If it's a state term contract that's been identified as convenience, you are not, as an agency, required to buy that good and or service from that contract. It's convenience is in place. You can use it or choose not to use it. These contracts are searchable, and we believe that the reason why they are advantageous for the state is that they offer lower prices, the quality of the products, the goods, and we have a negotiated shorter delivery time for the state. Open market delegation is really a procurement that's purchased according to the rules and regulations set out by the state, those laws that we talked about earlier, where there's no mandatory resource and there's no state term contract in place for it, whether it's good, IT or non-IT. And so if it's not a mandatory resource in place for that, then we're going to do an open market delegation, or open market purchase. I'm sorry, the delegation is really that amount that is set for the general purchasing authority for each agency, community college, or university. For most agencies, it's currently $50,000. So purchases that are under that amount, they are processed and executed in the agency and does not require any further review by, if it's non-IT, the Division of Purchase and Contracts. If it's an IT purchase, it would be the statewide IT procurement office. But if your purchase is over your agency delegation, then you must go through purchasing contracts for non-IT or DIT for IT purchases. And for IT purchases, the delegation hadn't changed yet, and that's generally $25,000. This is just an example. Obviously, I told you I'm with the Department of Transportation, so this is an example of a purchasing policy that we use in NCDOT. So this might look slightly different when you're working with a different agency, but it would not be that far off because we are all working under the same terms and rules in terms of amounts. Particularly if it's $50,000 or below, or $50,000 and or above, really. So for DOT, anything that's $10,000 or less, we consider that to be a micro purchase, and we really encourage our business units and divisions to use their P card, their procurement card, to procure those goods and services. Now, we do have some services in which we do not allow them to use their P card for, simply because the requirements, there are some legal or HIPAA kinds of requirements that goes with those services. And we need to have the documentation. We need to do that purchase on state solicitation documents, so that we can specify and the vendor can acknowledge that they understand and will meet or see those requirements of those mandates for those services. So for those, in those cases, regardless of the amount, we will use what we call the state paper, which is our solicitation documents, because we want to put our terms and conditions, and we need to put our terms and conditions in place to safeguard the state. For $10,000 and $1 up to $25,000 NCDOT, we consider that to be a small service, a small purchase, whether that's goods or services. And we currently, it's called an informal quote for us that we do. And so we're going to use our RFQ or IFB for those services that fall within that range. And we'll talk a little bit further down in the presentation around what is the RFQ and what is the IFB. So for those purchases that are $25,001 up to $50,000, that's an informal purchase for us, whether it's a good or services. We are required at that point to compete. Competition has to be involved. We do not have to advertise it. Means that we don't have to put it on, put it out for bid, but we do have to compete it. And that generally because we are required to have the vendors agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. And for that, again, we use our own solicitation documents because our terms and conditions are attached to that. And for goods, there's generally 3 quotes for us, and we usually use our RFP for that. For services, we're generally going to use our IFB or RFP for that. If it's over $50,000, that's considered for most of us a formal purchase, whether it's a good or service. We are required to have vendor agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions, and it must be advertised unless you have an approved waiver in place for it. For contract terms, standard is 3 years. If we want a contract that's longer than 3 years, there is we have to apply to the state purchasing officer through the Division of Purchasing Contracts. For non-IT contracts that we want to put in place for longer than 3 years, that's not typical. It happens, but most of our contracts are not more than 3 years for a lot of different reasons. We do have contracts that are over $1 million, and they are reviewed for NCDOT by both our attorneys here at NCDOT, and we're also required to have purchasing contracts legal to review it prior to posting it and before we award it. All right, terms and term contracts. So a standard term contract is really the basic definition of a term contract, and it can be mandatory or convenience. It's established for the use of all agencies, is what we talked about that just a moment ago specifically, but we also have agency-specific term contracts, and that's really a contract that is specific to that particular agency, something that they use and only they use, and they buy enough of it, and the frequency of those purchases are such that it makes sense to put an agency-wide contract in place for them. They are typically indefinite quantity. In other words, we're not guaranteeing to purchase a certain amount of them. but it makes sense to have a contract in place because we typically will purchase quite a few of them, but we're not going to guarantee a particular quantity amount. And it's usually whether to determine whether you need an agency specific contract is usually based on historical data. Again, the standard is 3 years. Anything over that requires additional review and approval. For our contractual services, that is an independent vendor who provides work or tasks that's really requires a specialized skills, knowledge, or experience. And we have some examples that are listed there on janitorial, landscaping, security guard. If you're going to come and do any type of training for us, hazardous waste, those are tasks that has to be performed with specialized knowledge and skills and experience with them. If it's a consultant contract, then that is also work a task that requires specialized knowledge, expertise, and professional qualifications. The difference here is that for a consultant, we are going to hire them to investigate a problem or a project, and we want them to provide us with counsel, right? They're going to do an analysis for us. They're going to provide us with some advice. And so that is a consultant. So they're not going to actually do the work. They're going to review the subject matter that we give to them, and they're going to come back to us with some counsel or some advice or some type of analysis of that data. For our consulting contracts, they must be approved through the governor's office. That's a seamless process for the vendor. In other words, that is already incorporated in our approval process. And so that'll get done. You won't know that that's what's happening, but that's what's happening in the background. We're required to do that. And then for any vendor that receives payment for services that's over $600, we do get a 1099 form from them for that. So our DIT purchases, again, those follow under the general statutes that are listed there, and we're talking about hardware, software, whether it's some type of database subscription, it's the license agreements, or you purchasing or utilizing some type of data. These are all done through the statewide IT procurement office, and they're looking at different things. They also have state terms contracts that are in place for IT purchases as well. I mentioned waivers of competition. These are purchases that we do that are done by means other than a competitive process. So we do not compete them. The most used reasons why there will be a waiver of competition in place is the fact that it's a sole source, meaning we can only get it from one entity. It's brand specific. We got to have a certain kind of something that is brand, it has to have, Kawasaki, that's just an example on it, right? It has to, that brand is specific and there's a need, and that has to be justified. The end users, the agencies, the people inside the agency just can't identify that they want a specific brand. They have to be able to justify that. And for NCDOT, I require my staff before any waivers are approved, I look at them. I have to approve all waivers because I understand the importance of competition in the state purchasing process. So if we're going to waive that, then I want to know why we're waiving it. And I want to, we just want to make sure it makes sense and that we're doing what's in the best interest of the state for that. Standardization is another reason that you will see that we waive competition. And that typically means that we already have some good or service that's already in place and being used, and it makes sense that in additional thing that we got that we do something that continue to what we've already started. So standardization, we want to buy this because that's what we bought previously. All our other equipment is Panasonic. So we want to make sure that, when we have additional needs that we continue to buy Panasonic because that's what our other data, our other applications are using. And if it's an ongoing job or task, that basically means that I've started a project and I've ordered 50 of whatever, right? And I need more. And so it doesn't make sense for me to go out and complete that. I just want to buy more of whatever I already got. So in other words, I have a greater quantity is needed than what was originally thought. And that uh, is the administrative code that's listed there, in which you can go out and read all of the conditions on which you could waive competition for the state. Are there any questions, Carla?
There are questions in the chat. The first one is, how do we as a small business, locate opportunities for micro purchases? For example, we are a small welding company. How would we locate opportunities for that?
So that's a great question. We're going to talk about, and I'll go ahead and answer the question, but we're gonna talk about that also a little later. But that is where you want to make sure you're registered, right, in EBP. You want to make sure that your information is current, and you want to make sure that you clearly identify what good and or service that you could provide for the state. So I'll leave my answer with that for right now, Carla, because we're going to talk about that a little later on.
Excellent. The next question, I am a freight broker. I provide different types of trucks for hire. What kind of opportunities will you have for my business?
So I can't speak for all the agencies. That's one of the benefits of registering with EBP and being a part of that because you'll be able to see all of the opportunities. So certainly for NCDOT, we do some state truck pickups, what we call state truck pickups, in which we use our own vehicles to do that. But we also do what we call delivery, right? And then most of those is working with our vendors that's supplying us with a good, whether that's asphalt, whether that's rock, some type of aggregate, which is really rock and sand, salt, so you would need to be in contact with so Carla can provide my contact information. So if you would send me an email, I'll put you in touch with someone on my team that can work with you to see what opportunities or to get you in contact with the different divisions. I don't know what part of the state you are working in. So that's what we can do to help you with that.
All right. For standard contract terms, are those, let's see if I can, for standard contract terms that are 3-year contract or one initial year with 2 renewal options, is that at the discretion of the awarding agency?
It is. Yes.
Okay. All right. And I just want to say in general, for some of the questions, there was a question about the listing. I believe it was the listing of agencies that you shared. That information will be included in the presentation when we share the presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Paula.
All right. Last question for the competition waiver. Do you all flag bids for small business, certified businesses to encourage sorry about that, to encourage the large companies to partner with small businesses on the contracts? Do we flag bids for small businesses to encourage the large companies to partner?
So we certainly promote and encourage the utilization of our hub certified vendors. Is there a requirement for our larger contracts that those awarded vendors use a hub? There is not. However, our focus, particularly where competition, um, it doesn't have to be advertised or competed. And so your opportunity to be able to identify specific vendors are in that area. They're normally the smaller dollar items awards, but again, for that's $25,000 and less. And so, if you can get several $20,000 contracts a year, right? That's pretty good. And also, we like to encourage our hub vendors to network with the larger vendors to let them know what they can do, what they can offer, and certainly try to partner with them in that way. But there is no for goods and services on General Statute 143. There is no requirement for that, and I think that's your question.
Yes. All right. Those are the last questions in the chat, and we can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, John has his hand raised. Go ahead, John.
Hi, this is just kind of in a follow-up to that question about the small bids. If one way that smaller vendors can get to work with larger vendors and know who those larger vendors are showing up to the pre-bid meetings. If there are pre-bid meetings or pre-conference meetings, whatever they want to call them, a vendor who may not be able to cover the entirety of that contract, but may be able to support part of it, can attend and network with the larger primes that are there and share what it is that you can do and see if that's some way that they can partner with you or use you as a sub.
That's exactly right. Thank you, John.
We can move forward.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So we are going to switch gears right here, and we're going to move into the process you need to follow if you want to do business with the state. And so we're going to talk about the electronic vendor portal, how to register and manage your account. So EVP, the basics, again, EVP is electronic vendor portal. And the takeaways from this slide are the fact that it's a single cloud-based application. It's a single point of access for North Carolina government agencies. We can post our solicitations through this EVP portal. You also can respond through the EVP portal, and it's important for you to, and I'll talk about this a little later as well, it's important for you to make sure you understand how the agency is receiving bid submissions, whether it's through EVP or through the normal paper submission process. And as a reminder, for goods, there is a 1.75% fee that's associated with those goods purchased. Some FAQ, frequently asked questions with regard to this. Why do we have a 1.75% fee? The fee offsets really the expense. So for the development, maintenance, ongoing for this electronic procurement process, it allows the state to conduct business electronically. And it also provides you, vendor, the opportunity to market yourself with this different state and entities and benefit from really the process and the time saving that occurs because it is an electronic process. It increases your ability to market to North Carolina government because you got one-stop shop really. And not just the government, you got the community colleges, the public school systems. It increased, we think, because it's electronic, the accuracy and consistency of it, which, as you know, in time is a cost saving advantage as well. The EVP registration, obviously you have to have internet access, your federal ID or your EIN number, your employee identification number. You must have a valid email address. And also as Colin mentioned, you are going to get this presentation. So there's a link there that's in the presentation, which you can go in and it'll help you with the registration process. And there's also their contact information for the help desk that can help you with EVP registration. So the new portal, and it's fairly new, it's still fairly new, we still calling it new. The good thing about it is that, the great thing about it is that it's free and it's an automated business opportunity notification system. So you register, and when you select the commodity code that's associated with the good and/or service that you want to offer to the state, every time the government posts a bid that associates with those selected commodity codes those commodity codes that you selected, then you will get a automatic notification that that bid has been posted. That is really why it's important that you make sure that you don't click every commodity code that's there, because one, you're going to be inundated you're going to get a lot of emails about postings, and you may miss that one opportunity or that two opportunities that you will have to actually be able to provide that service or good to the state. It is unlikely that you are able to provide every commodity code that's there. It is not in your best interest to do that. And the other thing, what I say about that is, it was asked earlier, how do you get, if it's not a competitive bid, how do agencies know that you're available and out there and can provide the good or service that they are looking for when it's not a solicited bid? You know, if it's in that smaller dollar range, how do we know that you're out there? Because we are checking the portal as well. We will go in and we are searching for certified hub vendors that can provide the good or service that we're looking for. And if we look at your we look at your company and we see that you have every commodity code listed, then I'm going to just be frank with you. We're going to move on because it is unlikely that you could provide. So we don't know which one you really can do. So please, make sure that the commodity codes that you do select are truly ones that you are willing and ready and able to provide for the state, to the state. It offers a
Joni,
one-stop
Joni, I was wondering if I could hop in on
Sure.
commodity codes.
Sure.
Where somebody asked a question about EVP in-depth training, and I'm putting the link in the chat for where you can go. There's like 9 specific trainings that you've got, and there's one in there on selecting commodity codes in EVP. There's 2 important things to recognize about selection of commodity codes in EVP, and it's broken up in that training. There's a selection of a commodity code for what will show up on that public vendor search that says, this is what we do. Make sure that is what you actually do, like Joni was saying. But there is another way of selecting commodity codes that will send emails to you, and that's part of that training in there. So there's the selection of the codes that will show up publicly, and a separate selection for the codes that you want to receive as by email. It defaults to the ones that you select for your company are the ones you're going to get emails for. But if there's some reason that you want to receive more notices about something, but you don't actually do it, you want to go into that second section of the training in the EVP selecting commodity codes in EVP document, and follow those instructions so you can select those, but not have something that you don't do show up on the public site. So I hope that's not confusing, but I want people to be aware that there's 2 ways of doing it. And if you want to know about opportunities that you don't actually do, but maybe like a predecessor to what you do, you need to pay attention to that and follow those instructions. It's not super duper hard. It's just not everybody, I think, knows about it. So thank you for letting me interrupt.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John.
Back to you, Joni.
Absolutely. Managing your EVP account, again, there's a link there that have job aides there that will assist you in making sure that happens. It helps you, it provides direction on how to change your EVP password, how to update your profile information. You need to add, delete, or edit your contact information. Just the information is there, so please make sure you utilize that as well. Questions?
Think we covered the questions in the chat that were pertaining to the module and EVP, and also provided the links.
Perfect.
And so we have no other questions in the chat. If we want to move forward, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Paula. So we're going to shift again, and we are going to talk about Hub program, the efforts that we are doing, and a little bit about the certification. Don't really get into a lot of that because you got Carla, you got John, you got the whole Hub office, and that is what they do. So they are the experts with regard to the certification process itself. So Hub, which is historically underutilized businesses, per executive order and general statute that is in place for the state of North Carolina. Big Hub goal for our agencies, both on construction spending and for goods and services, is 10%. So that is the minimum that the agency should be shooting for. The hubs are identified in EVP. The hub application, the certification and recertification is now processed through EVP. So the hub efforts, what we're doing around that language was added to all solicitations around hub and encouragement and the utilizations of that. We do upcoming opportunities, projections that we provide to Department of Administration, Division of Purchasing and Contracts. We also report our opportunities to the Hub office. We do, most of our agencies now have Hub liaisons whose job it is to specifically concentrate on our Hub communities, our certified Hub communities. Well, our Hub communities want to get you certified if you're not, to assist you and help you understand why that is a big help for you, the vendor, and us, the state, for you to be certified. And they also are able to answer specific questions with regard to the agency in which they're working, and certainly can point you in the direction of that their peer at another agency if you're interested in working with a different agency as well. And also notices of opportunities as we discussed previously. Hub plan, this is an example of one that is specific to NCDOT. Again, it may look very different if you're working with another agency. So for us, for that small purchase range, and efforts must be exercised to seek a Hub vendor. We do require that of my staff. We do for the next range, open market range there, you see that a minimum of 3 quotes are required because we have to get the vendor to agree to the terms and conditions. I do require that they at least attempt to find one of the 3 quotes from a Hub vendor. Again, that is another reason why it's important that your contact information is current and that you are checking your the avenue that your emails, because that's how they are going to in these instances where it's not advertised, then they are going to send you an email with the solicitation document attached. So you need to make sure you're checking your emails and that you're being responsive to the emails, because there's a turnaround time that will be associated with each one of them. For our larger open market purchases, in which we do competition, and we do advertise, then we do post those bids solicitation documents, I'm sorry, in different places. And we really look to see if we can find at least one hub. Again, the standard language, hub language has been added to all our solicitation documents, to our formal solicitation documents. The hub certification process is, again, you're going to get this. So there's that link there that you can utilize to register and complete the application. And it also lets you know what is the required documentation for your certification. And that's based on your structure of your company, whether you're a sole proprietor or a corporation or LLC. The applications are, there are 3 different types. You only fill out one, the one that's more appropriate for you and your business. Reciprocity certification options, so they're there as well. You're going to get this presentation. These are lists of the documents that is required from all applicants in the certification process. So, another list of the documents. It may look like a lot, but these are probably more in your business. These are pretty common kinds of documents that you can have. And certainly our friends at the Hub office can assist you with any questions you may have about any of them, any of these documents. Are there any questions?
Is one question that was asked earlier about primes. And the question is, how do we see that list of primes? Are there any inroads programs set up for that?
I don't know that there is a list of primes that exists. I think I would just join John in what he suggested is that we're going to talk a little bit about site visits. Those are definitely opportunities. The different agencies also offer meet the vendor kinds of networking opportunities, be abreast. Make sure the agencies have your contact information, what goods and services you are able to offer to them, so that when those the hub liaison contact for each of the agencies are great points of contact for this type of information. Make sure they have your contact information, what it is you're interested in offering, and you have to attend these events and make sure you are talking to these prime vendors and making sure they understand your capability and what you're able to do and what you want to do and what part of the state you can provide service to. So there isn't I don't know of a list that exists that we can just send you a list of names of people to contact. So I don't think that exists. I think it's a networking opportunity. And I think that you need to make sure you are, again, abreast of the meet the vendor, the different outreach programs and activities that the different agencies hold, because those are great ways of getting to know the people that are in that field that you want to get into, as well as getting to know the folks at the agency that are making the decisions on selecting, what vendors that they want to use. It is also a great opportunity for you to know each other. Maybe you can get with another hub vendor and the two of you can, between your resources, be able to meet the requirements of something that perhaps you can't do on your own. So there are different ways in which to do that. Primes is certainly a great way, but you also can join resources amongst yourself and be able to do that as well.
And Joni, if I could offer an idea or two.
Sure.
There's a list of state term contracts on the North Carolina Division of Purchase and Contract website. And the vendors who are on that state term contract, they would be considered the primes for their contract. There are some contracts where there's only one vendor on that contract. there are some contracts where there's many contractors on the contract. So that is one way that you might be able to think about it. There's probably 100 or so state term contracts. So there's at least 100 primes that you could consider there. Another thought, and it's probably a little bit more digging, but there on the electronic vendor portal site is a listing of solicitations. And if you find a solicitation that is similar to what you are doing, even if it's already been awarded, and I'm specifically thinking about ones that have been awarded, you can typically they will show who was awarded the contract. And that might be another company that you could reach out to and say, hey, you are doing something that I have a portion of, and I'd like to see if there's any way that we can work together. Sometimes you can join in with a company after they've received the contract. There may be some times where, based on the contract, they don't allow that. So it's not a guarantee that just because you reach out to them, they're going to say, sure, come on board. But just wanted to offer those ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, Joni, I believe we can proceed. There are no other questions.
Okay, thank you, Paula.
You're
And thank
welcome.
you, John. In this section, we're going to talk about competition, the different types of solicitation documents that's used for that, the content and the requirements versus the evaluation criteria. So for solicitation planning, this is really required information that's provided to at NCDOT, my staff, right? And at the different purchasing departments within all of the different agencies. At the end user level, the folks that actually have the need, who's going to use the product or service that we are procuring for them, they have to identify the need, as we talked about earlier. We're going to be gathering information. We're going to, they are going to be developing specifications and scopes of work. We purchasers going to get involved the review and authorization of documents and processes is really what we do. Prepare the solicitation document and either post it or send it directly. Again, if it's not a competitive process, we're going to send it directly to the vendor. So our purchasing part, is mainly the management of the accurate solicitation document, the actual solicitation of bids itself, and the award process, making sure the evaluation is done the way we said it we were going to do, and that the recommendation makes sense, right? We have support and justification and documentations for every thing that that's in the recommendation. So that is what purchasing does in the planning process. I want to talk about the vendor direct quotes. That's an EVP tool that we have. It's for goods or services. It's typically used for purchases up to that $25,000. And so that is again, you register and your feel good and service is what they're looking for. And that this particular purchase is under $25,000 and they're going to be looking for you. They've been a different purchasing professionals that's in each of the agencies. So that is what they're going to be looking for when they do that. That's why it's important to make sure your information is correct. We also have what we call informal request quote. And this is also used for goods or services and purchases up to $50,000, right? Again, the buyer is able to select from a list of registered vendors. The quote is sent directly to the vendor, and you are required, the vendor is required to agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. For our RFQs, that is a request for a quote. It is normally used for non-advertised procurements. So those are the ones that we're going to email directly to you. You will agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. That's one of the reasons why we're using our own document. We are seeking competition, right? In this case, unless it's a waiver, approved waiver in place. So you need to make sure you're responsive to that, and you're going to send your response back. Again, it's important. They will tell you, the document will tell you how they want to get your response back. Typically, you will attach it and send it back via email. It is also possible that they will allow you to fax it to them. But you're working with NCDOT purchasing, we're not going to do the fax. I just personally prefer my staff not to use that because in our case, we're in this building downtown. We're on a floor that house other departments as well. And the fax machine, the copier and printer, there's a great big room that those things are located in. So if you fax it and someone else gets down there before we do and think it's theirs and take it, we don't know who have it. It just gets to be confusing. So I prefer my staff, I've instructed them to do it strictly by email. Again, fax is possible, but please make sure you follow the direction that's in the solicitation document as to how they want the response to come back. Responses are not held until a certain day. They will be open immediately upon receipt, which is different than what could be different than what a advertised competitive bid would be, because in most cases there is an identified open date and time. And for instance, if it was a advertised solicitation and I'm saying my opening date is August the 20th at 2 p.m. If I get your bid on August the 18th, I cannot open it until August the 20th at 2 p.m. In this case, for RFQs, where we're going to email it to you, you email it back. Once we get it, we're going to open it. We're not going to wait for a particular day. That's another reason why you need to make sure you are responsive. You are checking your emails and you are being responsive to the RFQ. Even if you get the RFQ and it's not something you can do for quantity or timing, delivery times, requirements, or anything like that, please respond to the buyer to say that you received it, but at this time, you are not able to submit a quote for it, but you are interested in doing business and would like to be considered for future opportunities. Respond in some way so that they know that this is a viable vendor and they should continue to check with you for opportunities. IFB, invitation for bid. This is a solicitation document that's usually used for what we call well-defined goods and simple services, meaning we know exactly what we want, right? Typically it's for purchases that's over $50,000, where it can be used lower than that, but typically they're over $50,000. That's when, again, it's well-defined goods or services. We know exactly what we want. We're going to put that requirement, that specification in the IFB. And in that case, if I say I want brown pencils and I get 10 responses and all 10 responses say they can provide me with brown pencils, then it's in the best interest of the state to go with the lowest bid response in that case, because they all meet the requirement, right? They can all provide it. It would make sense to go with the lowest price means specification. Again, in these solicitation documents, it would tell you how it would be awarded. So it would, in this case, if I was using lowest responsive bid meeting specification, in most cases, typically just called low cost meet spec, it means the same thing, then that document would say that that's how it's being awarded based on that. So that means that regardless of, how many bids we get, as long as they certify that they can provide what we're looking for as a well-defined good, a simple service, then we are going to award to the lowest cost meet spec. It's posted, all our solicitations that are posted on the open market, then they are required to be posted for a minimum of 10 days. And of course, the more complex or more, requirements that are in the solicitation, then they are typically posted for longer than 10 days. In other words, you have longer than 10 days to respond back to the solicitation, but at a minimum, it would be 10 days. It's a public bid opening and potential site visits. We'll talk about that, a little bit about that as well. For our RFP, request for proposals, these are typically used in a competitive process. But these are for more complex or a combination of goods and services procurements that we're looking for. And almost always they're going to be over $50,000. So these are the big dollar items, right? Big dollar processing services that we're looking for. Like the division know what we want, but we want to ask the vendor community that can provide that. What's the best way to do that? So what you're doing is you're submitting a proposal, your best solution on how we can get our end result. The evaluation method that's used in this case is other than low cost meet spec. So while cost is a factor, it's not the most important factor. We want to make sure that our end, whatever we identified as our end result, that you meet those requirements, exceed them, that you have the personnel, the skills, the knowledge, that you have done previous work of a similar size as the project that's being, or the goods that are being procured. Again, it is a solicitation publicly advertised, so it has a minimum of 10 days. But as I said, the more complex, the more goods or services that are being required, then that 10 days may be 20 days, it may be 15, but all that information will be in the document, the RFP itself. And so you will know exactly how long and what's the deadline on when getting your response back. When you have more complex services or goods that you are seeking, then all bid opens are public. So regardless of the amount of money, they're all public. But the more complex, the more increase the potential of there actually being a site visit or some type of communication prior to the due of the bid submissions. RFI, which is a request for information, that is really what it is. It is a request for information. We want to gather some data that's out on the market. We want to ascertain how many vendors that are out there that could possibly provide this good and or service to us. It is not a solicitation document, so therefore it would not result in an award. It has no terms and conditions because we're not going into a contract. We are just seeking information, and once the response period ends, then that RFI is canceled. Let's talk about the different sections of the solicitation document. The first section in 1.0 is the purpose and background. That is where the agency will give you information on why, when, and in some cases, historical data on what they're buying, why they're buying it, and what they're going to use it for. In section 2.0 is a general information section. That's where you're going to find the solicitation schedule. In most competitive advertised bids, not most, there is a question period. There's a period of time which the agency will accept questions. And obviously it's before the due date of the bid, and it also will allow them time to get the questions, get responses to the questions, and post the responses so that everyone will see what those responses are. And it's also in that section is where you're going to see the bid submittal information, how and when and what, it is, what day and time it is it required to be back, what type of, what number of originals, do we need the copies to be electronic, if we, just anything about the general information about that'll be in section 2.0. And section 3.0 is where we will talk about the method of award. I said we will tell you how we are going to award the contract, whether it's going to be a competitive bid, it's going to be evaluations, which is a competitive bid. Well, they're all competitive bids. So whether the bid would be evaluated, and that means that it's not just based on cost, or we're going to award it based on the lowest cost meeting specification. It has to be responsive and it has to meet the specification. If all those criteria are there, then we're gonna, in a low cost meet specification case, we will award to the lowest vendor, but that information will be in section 3.0. In section 4.0, that's where you're going to find, just some real general, information, but that's more around the contractual side of it in terms of delivery. If there's any warranty that we want references, we may ask for them, we may not. If there's vendor experience requirements, that information is going to be there. If there are any certifications or licensures that are required, that information will be there as well. And section 5.0 is where we will identify or state what our scope of work is. What is it we want to do? What are we looking for? What does it require specification? What are our objectives? What are we trying to do? Are there any deviations that would be allowed? That information is there. If there are any safety kind of labels, if we want to understand your technical approach to, particularly in the case of an RFP, a request for a proposal, where we looking to you for a solution, then we're going to put that information in 5.0 as to what our minimum requirements are. And section 6, that's the administration of the contract section, where we're gonna if depending upon usually the size of the contract and the services that are required, we may require that you identify a project manager or a point of contact for us. And we will also, once we award the contract, we'll provide that same information. A point of contact for the agency will be provided to the awarded vendor or vendors. If there's any type of reports that are due, that information will be in section 6.0, as well as how we're going to handle any dispute or contract changes and things of that nature. And then we have an attachment section of the solicitation document, and that's where you're going to find the pricing form. That's what, you're going to complete that. Obviously, if there's any instructions for the vendors, that's where our terms and conditions will be located. And any supplemental information that needs to be there, any maps or diagrams. There's a financial condition statement that's there as well. Let's talk a little bit about documents of change. So there are really 4 that are more commonly used. So an addendum is a change that's made before the solicitation is open. For example, if I have a bid that's posted that has certain requirements on it, and one of the ways in which we are notified of needed changes, or if we realize after we post it that something needs to be changed that's in that posted document, the way that I make that change is through an addendum, because it has not been opened. So it's on the market, it's out there. And if I want to make any changes, I would do it by an addendum, which is another document. They're not, as big as the solicitation itself. It will only speak to what the change is, and that's it. But it's important, if you are going to be responding to a solicitation, that you keep a regular check back there where the solicitation is posted, because if there's an addendum, it's going to be posted in the same place, in the same location, and you don't have to look all over for it. It's good if you go back to the original posting. If there's an addendum, the addendum will be right below it in that same section. So you need to make sure you are keeping a regular check on the posting until the opening date and time. Requests for clarification, we send those out to vendors after we get your bid submission, and if we have a question or we want to confirm some data, if something is a little off, if that's not an opportunity to change information, but it's an opportunity to clarify information once we have your bid submission. The best and final offer, what we call BAFO, that is sent to a vendor when we are in negotiations. So you will only see that if we are in negotiations with you. That's not a promise, but it's a good sign. That means that we are really considering your offer. And that we think, we'd like to talk about some tweaks or additional information we need from clarification we need from you as well. So that's and we have a negotiation meeting. After that meeting, what you will receive is a best and final offer, which is, and again, it's not anywhere near the same number of pages or size as a solicitation document. It's generally 3 to 4 pages at most, 3 to 4 pages. And it's going to specifically talk about those things that were agreed upon in the negotiation, right? And it's an opportunity for you, the vendor, to review that and agree or provide the requested additional information. It becomes a legal binding part of the contract of the original solicitation that you responded to, that we're negotiating about. It becomes a legal part of that. And that's how we get any changes. We, the state, will get any changes that's agreed upon after your submission, how we make that legal and binding on both our part as well as your part, is through what we call the BAFO, the best and final offer. You sign it, send it back in. That's actually what we're going to sign the contract, and that would be our agreed upon contract. And then amendments are what we use once we have a contract in place. If we need to make any changes, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Even if we are going to, someone mentioned, typically our contracts are 1 year with 2 1-year renewable options. If we are going to, if we want to change the date or the expiration date of the contract, we're going to amend the contract to do that. So but that has to be agreed upon by both the vendor and the agency. So, neither party can just amend the contract on its own. So the amendment is a process that happens after the contract is in place. Like I said a lot, but I hope that was kind of clear. So I want to talk about words and how important they are, how important it is that you read their entire solicitation document carefully and make sure you understand. You see shall, must, and mandatory. Those are what those words mean, exactly that. And we are governed, the agency was governed to do what we say in the document, unless, again, we put some type of addendum out there that will clearly change something. Otherwise, we will do exactly what's in the document. It's important that you sign and that's where you see the error there, that you make sure the bid that you're submitting, that you sign and date it, all right? And that box that's there in the middle of the page, that's was taken from a solicitation document, right? RFQ, or IFB, or RFP. All of them have that form and that box in some location with them. And you need to make sure you sign them, because unsigned bid submission is not a valid or legal offer that we could consider. I usually interject here that I only know of one instance in which we may, but don't take that chance. Always sign them. There's only one instance that I know of in which our attorneys have allowed us to be able to accept a bid that's not signed, and that's when it's a RFP, that really big, complex one. One of the things that's required with the RFP is that you do a introduction or vendor acknowledgement letter. It has to be an actual letter that you put in there that you include with your bid submission. And in that letter, if you indicate your willingness to abide by the terms and conditions, that you want to be, go in contract with the state, you meet the requirements, you will be, you will carry out the requirements of the contract, and you sign that form, you sign that letter that you put in their RFP, and that's the only time we can take that as your legal binding signature. Otherwise, me personally, I'm going to sign both that letter and I'm going to sign this box. right? But I want to be transparent. That's the only time that I know of in my career with the state that it has been allowed with the unsigned box. Typically, if you don't sign it, it's not a legal offer. We can't consider it. We're not going to do anything. So when my office get bid submissions, one of the things that first things they look for is to make sure it's signed. Because otherwise, there's no need for us to review it because we can't do anything with it because it's not a legal offer for us. So please make sure you pay attention to the read and pay attention to the entire languages in this solicitation and make sure you sign your proposal. This is the schedule is this box pretty much going to look like this. That's in particularly the advertised solicitation documents. You're going to see a box that's there. On the left-hand side, you're going to see really what it is that they're providing you information. The middle section talks about who's responsible for doing what, that action. And then the column on the right is the date and time. Issue solicitation, the state is going to do that. We're going to put the date that we issued the solicitation. If we're going to have a pre-bid or a site visit, the state will put in that next column the date and time that pre-bid meeting or that site visit will happen. And inside of the document, you will get more information around the location and the requirements that's pertaining to the pre-bid meeting or the site visit. Also, you see submit written questions. You vendor responsible for submitting any written questions that you may have regarding that solicitation. There will be a date and time that the written questions must be submitted by. And inside of the solicitation, it will tell you who to send the written questions to, provide a email address for that person. You provide responses to the questions. The state, you may or may not see that line in the schedule, but if it is, there's a date and time that they are going to aim for to provide you with responses to the questions. We are not going to answer your questions individually, but I got a section on questions, so I'll say more about that in a minute. Submit bids, that's the date and time. This is critical. That is the date and time in which your response have to be back in the office, and it will tell you in the document where it has to be on that date and time. If it is not there on that date and time, it would not be reviewed. Contract award date, the contract effective dates, those lines may or may not be there. If they are, please know that those are best efforts dates that they are working towards. Obviously, the longer the procurement process takes, the less that maybe that date has to be pushed out some. If we go into negotiations, in other words, and that may take some additional couple of days, and so that may make that contract award date to be a little off. So please understand, with regard to the contract award and the effective date, those are best effort dates that are listed, the dates that you really need to make sure that are firm, unless there's an addendum. Again, an addendum, remember I said an addendum is the document that would be posted if anything changes. If they need to change the date of the site visit, they would, after they posted it, right? They posted a date and time. If they need to change that, then they would do that through an addendum, and it would be located in the same place as solicitation document. So make sure if you saw that a site visit is or pre-bid meeting is happening, make sure you keep an eye on that solicitation posting so you can see if an addendum have been added, and if that addendum addresses either the pre-bid meeting or the site visit. Submit written questions, that date, again, if there are, we receive a whole lot more questions than we anticipated, we may need additional day or two, then we will do an addendum to give you, or we find that we need to, and if we make some changes through the addendum that we want to give you more time to consider the changes, then we're going to put an addendum out the addendum will include the new submit written date, question date, so that you can have additional time to do that. Obviously, if we put additional days in there for whatever reason, then that could very well affect the submit date, and that date more than likely will be moved out as well. So it's just really important that you, if you are going to submit a response, and we hope that you will, that you also make sure you keep a watch on the solicitation. Just because you see it posted and you grab it, print it, or however you're going to utilize it, make sure you stay in touch with that same posting so that you can see if there's been any changes that's relevant to how you want to respond in the time frame that you need to do things. Vendor questions. So in our solicited advertised documents, you will have an opportunity, in most cases, that will be our IFB and our RFP. You will have an opportunity to submit questions. So we posted a bid, right? You got notification, you've gone in, you are reviewing the bid, the solicitation document, I'm sorry, and then you have a question. Well, in that same solicitation document, it gives you the name or contact information for the point of contact at that time. This is during the procurement process. It would be someone, for NCDOT, it would be someone on my staff, right? If it was DHHS, it will be someone in the DHHS staff, right? So they will give a name, a number, and an email address that you can contact that person. In this case, the questions must be in writing. Right, it must be in writing, so you got to email them your question. You pick up the phone and call them, you could. They may or may not answer your question. They may direct you to send your question in writing. But please know this, even if they answer your question verbally, it is not legally binding on the state, right? What you want is to submit your question in writing. And what we do is, again, questions are due August the 20th at 2 p.m. If I receive the question on August the 14th, I'm going to take that question. I'm going to put it on the table, a chart that I'm composing for all questions. As questions come in, I'm going to add the question to my chart, right? Once August the 20th, 2 p.m. come in, that's the deadline for questions. So at 2 p.m., I've received the last question that I can accept. I'm going to take that chart of questions, and if it's a procurement question, then I, as the procurement professional, will it'll be the question on one side, the response to the question right beside it, right? So I'm going to answer all the questions pertaining to procurement. If it's a subject matter expert kind of questions, I'm not an aggregate expert. So if your question is pertaining to a certain kinds of aggregate will be accepted, then I'm going to send that question to the division that is requesting it, and let them provide me with a response. And then once I get all the responses to the questions, then I'm going to post an addendum with all the questions and all the answers. So everybody will see all the questions, all the answers at the same time. So I'm not going to answer your individual question, or I should not. And you shouldn't want me to answer a phone call, because regardless of if I shouldn't answer it, but if I did over the phone, it's not legally binding. It becomes legally binding once we post it as an addendum, because an addendum is part of the contract. But that's what you want. That's really what you want. So again, submit your questions in writing. The instructions on how to do that will be in the solicitation document. All the questions submitted by the deadline will be answered and posted, right, in the same location as where the solicitation is posted. Site visits. They can be one or two things, and they will be identified as one or two things in the solicitation documents. And that is, they either going to be mandatory, which means if you want us to consider your bid submission, if you want to be considered for award, and there's a site visit associated with the procurement, and it states that it's mandatory, if you do not go, then we will not consider your submission. So it will, in the solicitation document, it will tell you the specific time, date, and location time, date, and location will be provided to you. There will be a sign-in sheet. You got to sign in and out, right? Late vendors, you can attend, but your offer would not be accepted because why? At the start time, we're going to take this sign-in sheet up, right? And we're not gonna, get into a dispute with you about whether you can attend or not. You can stay if that's what you want to do, but you won't sign in and we won't consider your offer. So please make sure you're there on time at the location that's provided. If it says urged and cautioned, we recommend that you come, but you're not required to do so, right? It again, if it's urged and cautioned, the specific date, time, and location will be in this solicitation document. We will have a sign-in sheet, right? If you're late, that's fine. You can come, you can attend. Attendance is not a requirement for urge and caution. We recommend that you come, but you don't have to. Even so, if you're urge and caution and you don't come, that's fine. You still can submit a response to the bid solicitation, and we will consider it.
If you want to have an authentic Jamaican experience, come to the Jamaican kitchen. Yeah,
Can someone please go on mute? I hear you talking.
taking shifts and food that will bring you out.
Submittal instructions, again, please make sure you are reading solicitation document so that you'll know the bid submittal process, any deadlines that's involved, any mandatory return information that has to be included. If there's any mandatory, if there's any site visits, period, I recommend that you go, whether it's you definitely have to go if it's mandatory. Even if it's urgent caution, I recommend that you go. But you have to go for the mandatory ones if you want your bid submission to be considered. Please make sure you read the submittal instructions. They will be provided in the solicitation document. Vendor requirements, these are the specifications the vendors must meet or submit with this proposal. So please make sure you understand what they are. These requirements for us is a yes or no. Do you need it or not? There's no kind of in between with that. Some examples are listed there. If we say that the product must be delivered within 15 consecutive calendar days of the award. And we will have a section there for you to fill out how many days that you can deliver it within. If we say it has to be 15, if you say you could deliver it in 20, then you don't meet the requirements because the requirements was 15. So it's a yes or no situation, right? If it requires that you have a general contractor license, and the question is going to be asked inside the document, do you have this? If you check no, then you do not meet the requirements, right? So it's important that you understand that and that you respond accurately. Evaluation criteria. This is really how and the what the state will be evaluating in when they're trying to make award recommendations. On some possible evaluation criteria listed there, we may look at experience, past relative experience to what we're asking for in that specific procurement. We may ask for staffing plans, who's going to do the work. We want to know what are their credentials, right? What are their qualifications, what amount of experience. We may ask you for resumes for the staff, depending upon what the work is, right? And then your technical approach, how you're going to meet our requirements, right? And so those are the evaluation criteria, but they will be clearly identified for solicitations in which we're going to do an evaluation. Remember, it will either be evaluated, right? What we like to call best value. Or it would be low cost to meet specification. That's when it's a simple service or goods that we're asking for is a well-defined goods or simple service. And that means that, we want brown pencils. Anybody that can provide a brown pencil, the quantity and the date that we need it, we're going to go with the low cost. If we're going to look at something other than the fact that you could provide brown pencils, we need it to be, I don't know, engraved with something. then we're gonna put some evaluation criteria in that section that talks about how we're gonna award it. We're gonna say specifically in that section whether it would be low cost meet specification or there would be an evaluation process that's used. And in the document also will tell you what the evaluation criteria that we will be looking at that will be used to make that. Are there any questions?
We do have a few questions in the chat, and I am scrolling through. One question is, if we cannot attend a mandatory meeting, can we send a representative?
Yes, you can. And that's a great question. Thank you for it. You can, they need to make sure that they're on time and they sign in and that they indicate your business. Right? If there's a section for their name, there's a section for, not section, but a line item, a line, right? It's a sign-in sheet. It's a space where you fill in your name, the person who's attending name, who they're representing. So they need to make sure they put your business name there, right? And a contact information. So yes, absolutely. You need to
Next
make sure that that person is able to, has the skill base and the knowledge to be able to bring you back the information you need that we think if it's mandatory that you need to be there to get. So, but yes, you can, someone can represent your business.
Next question, what about insurance for goods? Is it acceptable to note you will obtain it if awarded, or must you have it before?
No, in those instances that where there are those type of requirements, then it is it's understood and it would say that you have a certain period of time and it'll tell you what that is after award to provide that verification that you have that.
An earlier question, in a similar webinar event with the DOC division, they mentioned sometimes they do not take the lowest bid because of their relationships with the vendor or history with a particular vendor. Does your department follow this same criteria as the DOC at times?
Okay, so let me say this about that question. If it is a formal bid and is advertised as a competitive bid, and they indicate in their solicitation document how they are going to award it, that is what they are required to, we are required to do. The only time and opportunity that you have is in those, again, those smaller dollar item sections or awards, I'm sorry, in which they're informal, right? But in those formal solicitation, we are required to state in that document how we are going to award that contract. And we are required by law to follow what we have in that document. Again, it's important that you make sure you are keeping up with any addendum that is posted while this solicitation is still on the, what we call on the street, prior to opening. I would have to think that in that case, then they were not doing a formal solicitation, that it was within that area, that realm of award in which they can make some decisions about that.
We have covered all the questions. I think we can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So in this section, we are going to talk about the EVP collaboration, this solicitation, search and response, and direct submittals. So direct submittals, there are different there are really different ways or options to submit your proposal or bid submission. So it is really important that you pay attention to the document that you receive, because it's going to tell you in that document how you are going to submit it. So there's a vendor direct quote. Again, we talked about the fact that for RFQs, we're going to email those to you, right? Then we talked about the IRQ response. That's also electronically. That EVP collaborative, we're going to talk a little bit about that, is within that tool, which is Ariba for us, which is a part of our e-procurement or our electronic procurement system, a process that we use for electronic procurements. And then, of course, we have the AJO by mail, right? And so it's important that you make sure you read your solicitation document that you receive, because they will tell you about what the acceptable submittal process is for that particular solicitation. So in our collaborative space, this is it's an informal quoting system, and that we're requesting price function, and it's within the EBB system. We use it to obtain quotes for goods and services from multiple vendors at the same time. It's another reason, really good reason why you want to make sure your contact information is current at all times. You will be the vendor will be agreeing to our terms and conditions, and it is typically for purchases up to $50,000. Our EVP search and response, these are used to post our formal solicitation, meaning, there are $50,000 and up, right? And it allows the state agencies themselves to advertise the solicitation, right? We're going to seek open and fair competition. We're going to post the tabulations. In other words, we're going to let you know who we received the bid from, what the bid price is, and I will limit the caveat to that is that if we anticipate negotiations, we may not provide pricing once the bid are opening, but we will do it once the award is made. We will also post the contract award information there as well. It allows you, the vendor, to be able to market your goods and services. It's a 24/7 business opportunity, so it's always, up and running. And it's a free registration, electronic registration that allows you to be notified of business opportunities. Again, for those particular commodity codes that you selected for the goods and or services that you want to provide to the state. And it's also an opportunity for you to view bid tabulation information as well as award information. This is a kind of a screen. Really just want to point out the different the new EVP portal. You will see at the top right where you will sign in. Then if you already is an existing EVP or not, or you can register. You see that same sign in or register there. Also an opportunity for you to browse solicitations that are out there. So you really need to spend some time in EVP to make sure you understand and utilize those help opportunities that are there as well. For solicitations, this is just an example of one of those, what it would look like, and it allows you to go in there and be able to put in a particular department if that's how you would respond to the solicitation and gain access to the sourcing tool there. Same here. This is it's a sample or example of a sourcing event page. And if you look in the top right hand corner, you will see a clock that's ticking. That's going to tell you the remaining time for to be able to bids to be accepted. Review prerequisites. If there's any prerequisite associated with that particular solicitation, you can see that there. And there's also to the left that checklist. If you want to see a specific section of content, you can go there as well for that. Are there any questions?
There is a question about the collaborative space. The
Mhm.
question is the collaborative space communication triggered by source codes as far as who receives the communications? And I'm wondering if source codes, are you speaking of commodity codes?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Dominique?
thinking as well. It would have to be commodity codes because that's what
Yes.
triggers. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That is the only question we have in the chat. And we can
We'll
move forward.
move on. Yes, thank you,
Thank you.
Paula. We're gonna pivot again, and in this section, we're gonna talk about the evaluation process. We're gonna talk about bid openings, specifically the methods of evaluations, reference checks, the just word about Executive Order 50, and then clarifications and baffles, which we kind of talked about a little bit previously. So the bid and proposal opening, the bid opening. So that's a part of the formal bid process, right? That means it's competitive process. It was advertised, and so it's considered to be formal. We will give you in that document the publicly the bid opening date, time, and location. Let me say this about bid openings. They are always public, whether it's done electronically or physically in a building or location. They are always public and you can attend them. What I also want to share is that if for your scheduling, if you cannot attend them, you could always email the procurement contact person that's listed on the solicitation document after the bid date and time and ask for the information on the bid submissions and the prices that were submitted. Again, if it's a negotiation anticipated, you may not be able to get the pricing at the time of the bid opening. But otherwise, particularly for when the IFBs, when they are simple services or well-defined goods already, we just doing the low cost me spec. We don't anticipate doing any negotiations. You could email that procurement professional and they will email you a list or that bid tabulation, right? Who we got a bid from and what amount did they bid, right? So you can do that either by attending the bid opening or you can email and request the information. And you will email the contact person that's listed on that particular solicitation. Late bids and proposals are not accepted. That's just period, right? There's no explanation. They're not accepted. We're not going to argue with anyone about it. If you insist that we take it, we're going to take it, but we will not open it, right? So late bids will not be reviewed or considered for award. Attendance sheets for the bid opening. We are going to do an attendance sheet. We'd like to know who's there in the room with us, right? There's no, ramifications, just for documentation purposes as a part of our procurement file as a step that was taken in that procurement process. Explanation and evaluation process. Again, that information will be in the solicitation document or how the bid will be evaluated and awarded. You can only contact the purchasing, it says agent, but the purchasing professional that's listed on a solicitation during the evaluation period. So, and it's really what the actual solicitation document says is that from the point of posting, or from the point of you receiving, if it's an email RFQ to you, from that point until after the award point, the only person that you should be talking to about anything relating to that procurement is that identified procurement professional that's name, contact information is in that solicitation. Right? Tabulations will be posted, again, as I stated previously. And if there's some type of update that needs to happen after award, that'll take place as well. Evaluation methods, kind of talked about them. Low cost method is where the submissions meet our requirements, and we're gonna go with the offer that's lowest cost to the agency. The best value are the evaluated processes. We do it one or two ways. Are you gonna do the weighted method? We're gonna tell you what the different components that we're gonna be using to evaluate it. In addition to identifying, like we talked about, experience or technical approach, beside ever how many, and it's usually 4, maybe 5 criteria. Beside each one of them, there will be a weight assigned, and all of them will add up to be 100, right? But it'll specify all of that in the solicitation. If it's the narrative method that's used, it's a written, and we say narrative, so it's a written account of the merit of the bid proposal, and it's going to be evaluated really by a strength and the weakness process. And so they're gonna look at the strengths of what your proposal are, identify them. If there's a weakness, if it's missing something that they expected to see, then they may identify that as a weakness, or something that would risk that increase the risk of the unsuccessful contract performance. It's really what I call a flaw or weakness. And if it's a strength, is that thing a component that's going to enhance the potential success or contribute towards exceeding the contract requirements, right? So it's a good thing, it's a strength. We think, this thing, you've been able to provide this, whatever this is, right? It's a strength for you, and it will be evaluated or rated accordingly in that manner. So for evaluations, we're going to do it really one of two ways. It's either going to be low cost method or it's going to be the best value method. Within the best value method, the evaluation team, and they will say this up front, they can't decide once they get your submission, right? When we post the solicitation, it will say at that time whether we're going to use the weighted method or we're going to use the narrative method to evaluate it, and what we're going to be evaluating under each section, whichever method we use, what are the criteria that we're going to be looking at, and what weight will be given to that criteria if it's the weighted method. Reference checks, we may or may not check for those. Is really used to confirm the defendant has performed the service or offered the product of same size or scope or job performance in which we are procuring for. Again, we may or may not use it. If we do use it, we're going to ask all the same questions of all the references that we call, right? So we're not going to ask reference 1 these questions, another set of questions for reference 2. We're going to ask everybody the same question. We're going to document the question and the response, the date and time, and who we talked to. So all of that is required from the procurement professional, the evaluation team that is doing the reference checks. Not the procurement professional, the evaluation team. While that person is the procurement professional is a part of the evaluation team, they're there to make sure that the evaluation team follows what we said in the document that we're going to do in terms of how we evaluate. My staff job is to make sure that that's what happens, right? And Please look for, again, words are important. Make sure you know exactly what it states in the solicitation document. It's going to either say the vendor information must be provided. That means if it says must and you don't, then your bid is not responsive. If it say may, you can choose to do it or not. It typically would ask for the vendor information, and then it would say that the vendor shall or may be contacted. If it says shall, they will check them. If it says may, they may not check them. Either way, if we get 5 vendor responses, we're not going to check the vendors for 3 of them and not 5 of them. We either going to check them all, or we're not going to check any for each bid response that we get. So we will be consistent, whichever way we go. Clarifications and baffles, kind of talked about them a little earlier, so won't really spend a whole lot of time. Remember, request for clarification is usually a yes or no. We just asking for clarification that we are interpreting the information you provided us in the way that you want us to. So it's a yes or no. You can't change your or provide additional information, but it's just a clarification. You can't alter your proposed pricing in that process at all. Best and final offer, a baffle, again, is sent to confirm the negotiations when we had our negotiation meetings. We can do negotiations over the phone or email. Typically, these days and time, it would be a electronic meeting, a Zoom, or in our case, the state case, Microsoft Teams meeting is probably the way most of them would go these days. It can alter the vendor's proposal because you're going to make changes. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to agree on some changes that are necessary. We will always negotiate for pricing. That's just who we are, right? But please understand that the state doesn't have to negotiate at all. So you need to make sure you submit your best offer initially, because the state does not have to go into negotiations. Executive Order 50, that is what we call price matching opportunity for North Carolina vendors. It's used strictly for goods, not for services. If you do want to be considered for price matching, when you submit your bid response, if it's a good, there's an opportunity there for you to indicate that you want to be considered for price matching. And that opportunity comes if a North Carolina vendor price is within 5% or $10,000 of a non-resident vendor. So if it's another another vendor that's headquartered in another state, if they have the lowest cost, in this case, the lowest cost, and we had a North Carolina vendor that was within that range, 5% or $10,000, and you indicated at the time that you made your submission that you want to participate in price match, then we will give you an opportunity to do that. If you're a North Carolina registered vendor, and you indicate that you want to do it at the time that you submit your bid. Are there any questions?
There is one question in the chat, and that question is there any consideration given for a new vendors performing that scope of work for the first time? Are references for other scopes okay to provide?
I think that would be a great written question to ask during the written question period, simply because I think that would depend, right, on what it is exactly the agency is procuring, what they're buying, what they're, what services they're trying to, they're seeking, because, some things are more technical or more invasive. And so that would make the need for previous similar service experience more important. And then there are things in which, maybe depending upon how close your previous experience is in terms of sizing, would be allowable. So I don't know that there's a straight yes or no answer to your question. I think it really depends on what it is that is being purchased, what good or service it is. So that would be a great written question to submit to the procurement professional during the written question period. And I would, if I submit that question, I would say what my similar experience is, and and ask the question, would that be acceptable?
All right. And there are no more questions in the chat if we want to proceed.
Okay, so we're almost done. In this section, we're going to talk about award notifications, a little bit about what the purchase orders and invoicing would be. Award notification is really just that. That's where the purchasing office sends a certificate of award memo to the vendor. We're going to attach it also to the electronic purchase order that would be issued. We're going to post it within EVP within, we try 3 days, try to get it in there within 3 days of the final approvals. The award notification is what I'm referring to. And then once the contract has been awarded, then the procurement office is out of the process. We've done our job, and then you, vendor, will work directly with the unit within the agency that you will be providing that good and/or service to, right? So our job for the procurement's office job is to manage the procurement process. Once we have awarded the contract, we have completed our end in terms of our direct involvement with the vendor. You will start at that point working directly with the end user for the starting and completion of the contract. For purchase orders, this is information that's included, but it's not limited. There's typically, not typically, a description of the items or services that the agency is purchasing. It includes obviously pricing, delivery schedule, the payment terms and conditions will be attached to that as well. And if there are any comments for the vendor, they can be listed there on the purchase order as well. For invoicing, this is, it includes information like the description, again, an item or the description of the services that was completed. So that means that, the work is done, the contract has been fulfilled, and we are now issuing payment for that. It's going to reference, the invoice will reference the purchase order that is associated with the purchase. And it says contract number. Typically, it may be that the purchase order number and the contract number is the same number. So don't be surprised if you see that. Please make sure that you have updated your information in EVP so that where the invoice should be sent is current. Where the payment should be sent is current. And that typically the state pays in net 30 days terms. We are capable to do electronic payments, and that's part of what my team, if you're a new vendor with NCDOT, part of what my team would do is to get, help you to make sure that we have all those things in place at the beginning, so that, when we get to invoices, it's not the invoicing time it not becomes the issue. Are there any questions?
We have answered the questions in the chat. If we want to continue plowing forward, we can.
Okay. In this section, we're going to talk about contract management. We're going to a little bit about inspection and testing, renewals and amendments, the vendor protest section, and public records requests. So once we purchase and have awarded the contract, then what happens next is there should be what we call a contract kickoff meeting, right? That's where, again, I just said, once the contract is awarded, purchasing is pulled out of the process and you will work directly with the end user. Those people, that business unit, that division within the agency that is procuring, that need your services or your goods that we help them to get purchased. So at that meeting, you're going to do things to clarify terms and conditions. If there are any questions, we're going to clarify goals and objectives, make sure everybody's on the same page. We're going to revisit roles and responsibilities. Again, clarify delivery expectation. So this is a meeting for the vendor and the end user to just make sure everybody's on the same page about what this contract is and what the requirements are of it. Inspection and testing, the state will let the vendor know that if it's a good that we purchased from you, if there was any damaged goods that was included, if the order was inaccurate according to our purchase order quantities that we purchased, and if there's a type of late shipment, obviously we will be in touch with you about that. For quality acceptance and delivering installation, please know that the delivery is not considered to have occurred until installation has been completed, if that's appropriate for what we're getting from you. And that includes the disposal of any waste or debris or trash from the site. So all of that has to be completed before we consider the installation complete. If there are vendor complaints, that would be managed by the contract administrator and initially, and if there is dissatisfaction on either the vendor or the agency contractor administrator side, then my office for NCDOT or the purchasing office in whatever agency will be brought into the process to handle the vendor complaints, and that's a more formal process in which we will be issuing what we call cure letters, which we identify specifically what has occurred that was not according to what we contractually agreed to, and the cure, the remedy actions that we want and the deadlines that we want to see that happen. So that's not a process you want to get involved with, right? So make sure that the good and or service that you indicate that you could provide, and you submit your proposal or your bid for, to make sure that you're able to do that, because the state is believing the information you provide, and they're going into a contract with the expectation that you're going to be able to provide the good and or service in the way, time, manner in which you contracted to do so. So for renewals, these are really, again, I stated that contracts are typically 1 year with 2 renewable options is what 9 out of 10 of them says. There are some, again, that are 3 years or longer. They are possible, but it's unlikely. In most cases, especially today, because the market is forever changing, right? We just don't want to be the state. It's not in the best interest of the state to be necessarily, or you must have been to be locked into a contract, because that contract is going to indicate for us what we're looking for, and for you, the prices that we agreed to pay, right? So if the markets is constantly being volatile, it is in both sides' interest to not be necessarily locked into a contract because of that. Renewals are optionals. Please know that they do not have to be exercised. It's at the discretion of the state, the awarding agency, as to whether they want to exercise any of the renewal options. If we are going to renew, then obviously we are going to send you notification prior to the expiration of the current contract that we're under. And then, of course, we will be issuing new purchase orders for any renewals that we do. Amendments, we talked about that. Remember, those are the changes of any term or scope or information in an awarded contract. So the contract is being amended, some changes are being made. And only the agency purchasing office can do a term change in the contract or can work with an amendment. So we will step back involved in the process at certain instances. If those instances occurs, there's a need for an amendment. If there is a vendor complaint that reaches the level of a need for a cure for a letter, if there are renewals to the contract, we will step back involved to handle those specific things. And then again, your relationship is with the end user in terms of your day-to-day. Vendor protests, those are you are required to submit in writing if you have an interest and you decided to that we did not award a contract based on what we have listed in our solicitation document, right? Or that you think that some type of unfairness will happen in doing the evaluation process, right? You can't just say that I don't think you judged it unfairly. You have to provide specifics around which part of the evaluation you think went wrong or where we didn't do what we said we was going to do. You have 30 consecutive days from the date of the contract award, right? So we're going to tell you who we awarded the contract to. You have 30 days from the date if you want to issue a written protest. But again, it must contain specific reasons for your protest. Public records requests. So I think for new vendors that are getting started in governmental work and not real sure around what's typically how this process works or what that document looks like, or what was the last awarded a vendor proposal look like, then this thing called public records request could be a great thing, right? The vendors have to submit a public records request and it can only be for awarded contracts, right? If we are in the middle of a procurement process, that information is not public. It's only public if we award the contract. But you are able to submit your request to the agencies, and most agencies have a web-based or in a format on the internet now that you can fill out. And you need to really find out what is the agency process for public records requests, because our agencies don't do them the same. But you can send in a public record request and ask for awarded contract information. We do, just so you know, there are some information that would be considered confidential. But then if the information is identified once we have received the bid, and the vendor will have an opportunity to identify a certain information as being proprietary, and they want it to be considered confidential, what we would do is to send a clarification letter to me, and that's for two reasons. One, to notify them that, did you realize that you identified this information as being confidential? And two, do you understand that the state will not provide confidential information in a public records request? And that you, Mr. Vendor or Miss Vendor, if you have identified your information as confidential, and if the state receive a challenge to that confidential, then you are required to defend that action. The state is not going to go to court and defend why they did not release confidential information. Vendor who indicated the information is confidential, if there's a legal challenge to that, then you will have the expense of defending that in court. So we're going to make sure that you understand that, you're going to sign that and send it back to us. And so, but during the, as long as we have that, then we would not provide redacted information during public records because you can get everything else. And the other thing is, please understand, pricing is never considered confidential. So you cannot send us a bid response and say your pricing is confidential. It would never be considered confidential. Ever. And we're going to send you a clarification letter so that you understand that we will not hold your pricing. We will get that information out after the bid is awarded. Or if we don't intend to negotiate, then at the point of the bid opening, then where we give out the information on who submitted a bid and how much, then we'll get that information out at that time. But this is a perfect way that if you want to know who was the last awarded vendor for this particular product or service and what did their bid submission look like, you can petition that agency for that information, and they have to provide it to you as long as the bid was awarded. Next, we have just some quick, again, you're going to get this presentation. So there's some quick website resources there for you that can kind of help you. And Carla, are there any questions?
We do not have.
Me.
Oh, sorry. We do not have questions. Well, I think we just had one question to pop up. And then after this, we'll open up for unmuting your mics if you still have questions. And so this question is, can you speak to, for goods procurement, you are using tier 2 suppliers? What does this mean? Is this a manufacturer, wholesaler, or reseller?
No, though the tiers is usually referring to like a subcontractor, like if we yeah, there's typically what that means is subcontractors, tier 2. So typically, unless they're more on for NCDOT anyway, that is more when we are doing services more likely under our General Statute 136, in which we have a prime contractor and he may sub out certain part, he or she may sub out certain parts of the work. So that's what they're referring to when they say tier 2.
And then there was a second question from her that said, do you have an example of a bid where you would request Executive Order 50, or is it something we note on a separate document?
No, so again, Executive 50, the price matching is only for goods. It is not for services. So for all goods that are posted, solicited, then there is a section in there that you indicate that you want to be considered for price matching, right? And again, if you fall within that parameter of 5% of $10,000 of the non-North Carolina state, if the award would have gone to a non-North Carolina state, a state of North Carolina vendor, and the next lowest bid is the North Carolina vendor, and you indicated when you submitted your quote or your bid submission that you wanted to be considered for price matching and you fell within that category, then we will automatically reach out to you. So you would indicate at the time that you submit your bid that you want to be considered for price matching. There's no additional information. Documents. It's all in the solicitation document. It will be there.
All right. And so at this time, if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, we leave that open and you can ask your question now. Kyra?
Yes, my name is Kira Zander here. Yes, thank you very much for hosting this session. So I'm a veteran of Florida procurement and new based here in North Carolina. And what I didn't see here and just kind of wanted to confirm in Florida, they have a consultants competitive negotiation act, basically for professional design services, such things as architecture, engineering. And that goes through a completely different, it basically is a statute that establishes like a two-step procurement process for those types of services. I didn't see anything here. So would, any type of proposals for any type of, professional design services, that just goes through a standard RFP. It's like in Florida, that would automatically, a RFQ there is referred to as request for qualifications. That starts like a two-step process. So I didn't see any information about that. So I just wanted to clear that up and keep that part over in my Florida queue. And
Right. So thank you for a question. It's a great question. I did not mention, you're correct. But we do have the ability to do a two-step RFP. Is where you would see that request for proposal, because again, those are where proposals are where we have our more complex procurements. And so there is, if the end user and my office agree that it is it makes sense in one. So I got two answers for you. It makes sense in the procurement that we do a two-step in which, we first look at the technical requirements, and those meetings falling within a certain range. Then we will invite them to send they'll invite them that we're going to open their the second, which is the costing piece of it, right? And then evaluate that, and that process will go that way. Here at NCDOT, for the design and the more technical kind of services that you were referring to, we purchased those under General Statute 136.28. So, and that is done through our another section within DOT. And so, and they do what they call, I think it's LOI, letter of interest. And so in which they're sent out, lack of a better word, invitations, and let you know that they are taking letters of interest for certain architectural or design kinds of work, in which you will respond to that, send that back in, and if those type of opportunities come up, that they'll be in touch with that. So if you would send me an email or reach out to me, I will give you a contact for that.
Thank you.
And Kira, if you're talking about like vertical construction, there, like Joni was saying, there's a qualification-based selection process for most architects and engineers in the state of North Carolina, and that is a qualifications related thing. So we don't even get into pricing until they select the vendor that they're going to go with. So maybe that's similar to what you've experienced elsewhere.
Yes, that is. It was helpful. Like, I was on the procurement side for transportation agencies while I was in Florida. Now I'm a small business owner. So when I've been looking online for solicitations, the part that's missing for me on some of those types of projects is, there's no information on a mandatory date, and it's trying to figure out who are the primes, kind of that are trying to go where the bigger companies are, so that I, as a controller, or like, someone who does project controls and policy and things like that, can kind of get in and help. But
so I think you want to get on, for NCDOT, you want to get on the construction side of the house. You reach out to me, I'll let you know how to do that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And on the construction side, for not for DOT, but for the vertical construction of buildings and such, if that's something that you're interested in, I can put my email in the comments so that you can reach out. There may be, if you're not terribly familiar with primes in the state of North Carolina, there may be some tips that I can share with that.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
If there are any other questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute to ask. It seems we have no other questions. We did place a survey in the chat. Oh, I do see one hand. Betty, if you want to ask your question, feel free.
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate this training is very informative. And as I mentioned before, I am a freight broker, so I have access to trucks that might be needed for a construction site or the Department of Transportation. Can I go on the EVP site and find vendors that have been awarded contracts and reach out to them to see if they need assistance in moving freight?
Yes, obviously we will post award information there, so you certainly are free to reach out to any vendor there.
Will that information be on the site right now? A vendor that has won.
If there has been a contract of the nature that you were speaking of recently, I'm not sure, John, or Carla, how long it stays out there. Is it 3 months? I'm not sure.
Currently,
Go ahead, Carla.
I was just going to say currently indefinitely.
Okay.
It used to be a different timeline, but with the upgrade, it's indefinitely. Go ahead,
Perfect.
John. You want to
That's
add?
exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Carla, I
All
see
right.
Leroy Perry waving his hand, so I'm assuming he has a question.
All right. If you want to unmute, Leroy, we're listening.
Yes. How we doing today, ladies and gentlemen?
Good morning.
Okay. Now look, I'm a retired I'm a retired guy from the postal service. I got a small handyman business. I do painting, refurbish decks, light electrical, stuff like that. How do I go about researching stuff like that? And I also just recently purchased a cargo van, and I want to like get that up and moving. So what would be my best route to get that up and moving? Because like I told my wife, I was gonna try to drive it, but I don't want to be most of these dispatch companies. They want you out on the road like you driving a semi. That ain't my lifestyle. I said I want to be home with my wife and kids.
Mhm.
But if I could find somewhere I could work during the daytime and be home with my wife and kids, or if I could contract the van out to somebody.
Mhm.
That's my biggest dilemma is I'm gonna say I already got my certifications done. Now is trying to find the contract.
So, John, I don't know if you were going to respond, but let me just say this to you. I'm not sure. There may be some opportunity. I'm not asking you to stay on this call where you are, what area, but
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, so our divisions that are close in their area, there may be some opportunity there. I'm not sure. Again, it is a matter of being, and that's not necessarily something that would be posted on EVP. So, if you would send me your contact name and information, I can get you a contact in I think it's Division 10 that's in Charlotte. And maybe they can help identify. I'll let you know anyway if they have anything like that. The only other, because we're either going to post information like this or opportunities through EVP, it'd be a solicitation, a form of advertised bid, or for the smaller dollar bids that we do that does not require advertisement, then again, we are looking in for certified hub vendors. And again, that's why it's important, your contact information, what you're offering. But you are offering really something that's like a niche, like painting, and sounds like you want to do some small hauling necessarily. There may be some opportunities in a division. So we can try that.
Okay. All right. You said send you
Your contact
out
information.
through
Give
off
it
of
to
here.
Paula, she'll get it to me.
Okay. Okay.
When-
And
I'll
indicate what
email
it's about, please, because I get a lot of contacts. So if you indicate to caller, just reference this conversation, and then I know.
Okay. All right.
Thank
All right.
you.
I'll get that information over to her.
Thank
And
you, Leroy.
Yes, and what I will do is I did place Joni's information in the chat earlier, and when we send the information out, I'll reemphasize that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll get that over to caller as soon as we hang up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, did you have anything to add to that, John?
The not specifically, like on the freight side, I haven't seen too many direct postings in EVP for, freight or moving something from one place to another. It may be part of some other larger project. So if somebody is, and it depends on what you're trying to haul. You may not be trying to haul a bunch of broken concrete, but you may be trying to move some furniture from one place to another. There's probably a difference
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
But you might pay attention to some of the construction oriented projects that are posted on EVP. You do have several organizations down in Charlotte that are very focused on hub participation. City of Charlotte has a program. Mecklenburg County is pretty invested in that the county of Mecklenburg, the government, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools is pretty active in that area as well. You've also got community colleges, Central Piedmont Community College and UNC Charlotte all have pretty substantial hub interest. And some of them have people who are dedicated to trying to help hubs. And if you can identify those folks, you may be able to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a hub. This is what I do. Can you help point me to who I need to talk to? And some of those folks will be posted on the website. There is, I believe, UNC has a listing of all the hub coordinators at all the universities. It's actually under their capital and finance group. So that might be one place to go. And those people may know the more local people in those other organizations that they could point you to as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And it looks like we do have another hand up for Dominique.
We do, and if you want to unmute Dominique and ask your question.
Hello, thank you. First, I want to say thank you, Carla, for hosting this webinar, and to Joni and John for the information. I just wanted to follow up on the question about the tier 2 requirement in the bids. So I've seen some bids specifically for for goods, where it says after verifying that you're a hub vendor, it has the tier 2 question, and then it also has the subcontractor question. So I've seen it also where it's just a tier 2, and I thought it was for subcontractors that you have, as you had mentioned, Joni, but it is a little confusing because some of the other ones have both questions. So I was wondering if this, for goods in particular, is asking if you're getting the goods from the manufacturer or a reseller or a wholesaler. I wasn't quite sure what that meant when it states both questions.
I would need to see that because I'm not sure. I don't know why it would have both, but so I don't, I'm sorry. I would need to see that. To me,
Okay.
a tier two is a subcontractor. So if they're asking for both for that, I don't know if that's just a clarification. I don't know. I would need to see it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry.
All right. Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute.
And real quick, Leroy, I dropped the link to the UNC coordinators, hub coordinators network in the chat.
All right. If there are no more questions, that does end our session. On behalf of the Hub office and Director Alicia Lyon, thank you, Joni,